Hollow is where John Muir lived on the Big Head River in Meaford. And I was stunned that this property was going to be lost. But a really good thing happened, which was the ownership of the land, which was Stanley Knight Limited in Meaford, donated the land to the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy. So it was a big win. I don't know if Dennis Knight is in the audience. Has anybody seen Dennis tonight? He's a member of this club, so I wanted to make sure that he got honored because it was his family's property that has been donated. I guess he's not here. Anyhow, right after that happened, we had an event that happened to all of us, and it was called COVID. And during the COVID times, the trails were hugely overrun with lots of people. And in wet times in the winter, the trails were absolutely destroyed. After COVID, RTO7, which is our local tourist organization, put up some money to do infrastructure repairs on various tourist sites around our area. And I'm part of a little group in Meaford called the Trout Hollow Trails. And Chris Sherry and his wife, Marissa, applied for money and got a huge grant from RTO to do some work in the trails. Now, Chris is here tonight for the first time. So Chris, why don't you stand up and take a little honor? There at the back is Chris. Chris is here, but his wife happens to be in Antarctica tonight. Both of them are tour guides on cruise boats in the north and the south. So what happened is that when we got this big grant of money, we had to spend it. And we heard about this guy, Zane Davies. So we contacted him, and that began a long, very interesting learning for myself and for Chris and all of our little group of people about trails, trail building, and the politics that goes on behind trails and some of the negative sides of things that happen as well. So I've asked Zane to do some of the political side of the whole process of trails and trail building. One really good thing that came out of the fact that we were using Zane Davies is that EBC, which had not been taking care of trails anywhere, realized that they had to take care of trails as well. So once they saw that we were using Zane, they contacted him, and he's been doing workshops for the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy. The best part is that EBC has now installed a new woman in our area, and that's Amy Darrell. And Amy, I think you're here, aren't you? Okay, Amy, why don't you stand up, because you're important now in this area. So this is EBC, and Amy has this wonderful background because she grew up in the Forks of the Credit. Most of us only ever get to drive through or hike through, but she lived in the Forks of the Credit, which is just south of Orangeville. So yeah, so she's the best person to have on this. Okay, so Zane Davies, we're going to call up the what do they call him? The rainmaker, the magic maker, the mentor of all of us. But also he has a little trick that he can do, which is called walking on water. And so I've asked him to speak about walking on water too, because in our culture, when we talk about somebody who can walk on water, we know they're pretty exalted. So Zane, come on up, take your place.
Okay. What you gotta do? I think you're good to go. We're good? I think you're good to go. That's it? Yeah. You don't see my nose? Oh, yeah. Is that? Okay, cool. Is that everything? Yeah. Okay. All right. It's all you. Yeah. So feel free at any moment to ask a question or attack me if the mic doesn't work, if I need to get closer, if I need to hold it, if I pull the mic away because I tend to walk and talk with my hands and something falls apart, let me know. Full disclosure, I sometimes swear. So when I was asked for a title for this presentation, I sent back an email that maybe had a word. And I was like, I feel like this is where the state of trails in Ontario are at the moment. And I always like to reflect back to it's just a fabulous trail. So that's the theme of tonight. So I'm not going to swear. Hopefully, I'll be good. I'm not going to swear, but I am a construction worker. Okay? We'll get to the rest of it too. I also am a squirrel. Okay? And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but squirrels sometimes throw stuff out of trees and then they go down and collect them. So throughout this hour or this evening, if I'm throwing nuts out of a tree, and I know I do, at the end, my goal is to collect all the nuts and hopefully you leave with something. If I've thrown too many nuts and I've went on too many tangents, please ask questions. Let me close off all these discussions. So that's the thing is I'm a squirrel. I'll throw a bunch of nuts. If I haven't collected them by the end, please get back to me. Okay. And on that note, I prefer groups of 6 to 10 people. Okay. I'm pretty good at talking an ear off with 6 to 10 people. So if this isn't working for you, the goal is that we weed this group down to 6 to 10, and then we're going to have the best night ever. Okay. Yeah. 6 to 10. It'll be okay though. You ready? Okay, let's get into this. A fabulous trail. That's called the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. And I think I've missed my demographic tonight because you're the Owen Sound field naturalists. And the truth is you're the hardest to please with a trail. And you want to know the reason? Tyler, where are you? Did he leave? Darn it. I was going to attack him. He jumps through ferns to find a little plant that he needs to find, and he doesn't use a trail. That's the problem. And this is what the theme of tonight is. And this is the challenge of trails and me as a trail builder trying to sell something, which hopefully isn't snake oil, but we'll talk about that. And getting to where I hope we can be with trails in Ontario. Hey, there it is. All right. Sorry, I like pointers and stuff. So I got this. Let's just take a note here for a second on the information that we're being given in this sign. This is the Waterfront Recreational Trail. We have a runner, a biker, and a rollerblader. It says keep right, max 20 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that is. That's Waterfront Trail. That's Trans-Canada Trail. No motorized e-bikes on a trail. And if you want to get me going, ask about my theory on motorized e-bikes on a trail. Well, it's not a motor. Yes, it is. It clearly is. Let's just back up a second. Anyways, we're going to reflect back on this. So this here is the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. And when I had my 2 little kids and my wife, and we're walking across to go to, what were we doing? I forgot, Ripley's and some other stuff. I had to take a picture of this because it's, in my opinion, not a trail. I fully support it for what it provides as potentially an active transportation route, but I get grumpy when we call stuff like that a trail. Okay? So here's the most common conversation I have when I'm on a trail or playing with my little kid's toy in my living room. And I don't mean, if I offend you, I'm sorry. You, what are you doing? Me, I'm building a trail. You, thanks for volunteering. Me, not volunteering, it's my job. You, what? You get paid for this? I'm a trail captain and do this for free. Me, kind of different, but thanks. But thanks so much for volunteering. And I do honestly mean that. Okay. So if it seems like I come off a little sour at times, I do honestly mean thank you for volunteering because it wouldn't be possible. my last calculation for the Bruce Trail for me to build it was $80 million. I get paid for this, not $80 million though, because I maybe can build 5 kilometers a year. So I'm not going to be able to get you the Bruce Trail to what it is. That's why we need volunteers to do this and to help support this. Okay. So just out of curiosity, maybe I should ask the question. Why do you in the room use trails? What do you use trails for? Don't make me pick you. I'll pick. Just shout it out. To walk on. Thank you. Anything else? To explore. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right? To access areas you can't get to otherwise. Mental health. Mm-hmm. Anybody want to ride an ATV on a trail? No? Slightly sensitive room? Slightly sensitive? Off-road motorized? Okay. But you see what I'm getting at here is there's so many different uses, and this is the hard thing in Ontario is we lump it all together. And I think, and I'm the first to say this, I'm the last to actually partake in it, but I think we need to provide experiences for all the different users. I think everybody has a place to participate in whichever activity they want. You can educate them all you want. Feel free. I fully support that. But I just like to reflect that we need to try and do this if we want to have a cohesive trail experience in Ontario. So just out of curiosity, let's play a game. Okay? This is my backyard, by the way. This is my wife's photo, not mine. I can't take a picture to save my life. What is this? Pardon? Come on. Owen Sound Field Naturalist. I don't know what it is. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. I told my wife not to tell me what it is. It's a bird. Okay, so for me, honestly, it's a bird. Okay? For some of you in this room, like I can nail down that it's fauna. I can say that it's a bird, but for some of you in this room, you can probably get down to the genus, the species, and the Latin name. And that is awesome. And I appreciate that. What is this? You see what I did tonight? So, what is it? I don't know, but that sounds awesome. But again, same thing. I know that it's a fern, but I can't get that far. Okay. What is this? What type of trail is it? Well, that's the trail use. The trail use is mountain biking, but what type of trail is it? Okay. And what's the trail building technique? A berm. Hey, we're getting somewhere. Do you want a job? George Newton Nature Reserve. Tomorrow, I'm finishing a trail over by Goderich. And then Saturday's hockey, and then Sunday, I'm up on Manitoulin Island. 4 mountain bike trails. Anyways, yeah, that's technically, that's a type 3 trail. The designed use is mountain biking, and the trail building technique is, you could argue race tread, but it's technically an in-slope turn, which is also a berm. And the guy who built it, who's standing in the picture, is a famous trail builder for Red Bull athletes. And he awesomely has kids my age and decided to live in Bracebridge. He doesn't like to drive more than an hour from home. and he wants to sleep in his own bed. So for 2 years of working with him, I was twisting his arm that I had a client. Just tell me a number. Give me a number. I want this there. And he gave me a number, and this March we went and built that trail for the city of St. Thomas. Okay. I purposely put in a mountain bike picture, by the way, just so you know. What is this? Aha, Robert. This is Trout Hollow Trail. Okay, so this is the entrance. So what is the trail type? This is a trick question. It's technically a type 3 trail as well. So it's the same type of trail as the mountain bike trail. So you, Robert, have something in common with the best damn mountain bike trail in St. Thomas. The trail use, this is a hard one. Okay. Chris, you're up. What's the trail use? Who's our user? Yeah, exactly. And that's perfectly acceptable. Pedestrian. A pedestrian trail is perfectly acceptable. I like to get a little bit more detailed. And the reason I like to get a little bit more detailed is we have hikers and we have fishermen. Yeah. And multi-use trails. It's really hard to satisfy every single user on a multi-use trail, and this is one of those. And the reason is, depending on the type of hiker and how prepared they are for the experience they're about to partake in, mud, roots, and rocks in the context of the activity is okay. Until it gets so disturbed that it's not okay. And that's the challenge. When you go fishing, you have chest waders on.
I gotta leave.
Mud and water up to your chest is okay. And now we're trying to satisfy the same user on the trail. Okay. So this is the challenge is we come in and we look at this and we try and figure it out. Now I did that picture on purpose because there's a technique that we use to try and fix what's known as a fall line trail, and we move the trail up to the left. Okay. So the trail type is a type 3 trail. The trail use is different than the last picture. It's pedestrian. The trail building technique, there's a couple going on there, and it's kind of a trick question. There's a partial bench cut. There's a grade reversal in there. There's actually a dip. It's been reinforced with rock. It was done for free, by the way. I just wanted to do it so that we did it. It wasn't a part of the job. And then that leads into a boardwalk. And we've had success in keeping that area drier. And that way everybody is happy. And there's a lot of dynamics going in there. And the fishermen notice what's going on. And the landowner at the top of the hill is noticing. And it's because volunteers got involved. Okay. And this is a success story of, I think, how we can work together. Now, I'm not allowed to advertise the John Muir Trail, right? Okay. Wait, no, we can advertise that one. That's in the US. I've heard of that one before. We can't talk about the other one near Meaford called the Trout Hollow Trail. Okay. I love doing this. Okay. Because we have this image in our mind of a trail. And I find Google does a pretty good job at picking my brain. I don't like it, but it does. So just for the heck of it, I tried to shut off. I logged myself out because it pings off on what I do. I logged in as a guest. I just typed in trail into Google and this comes up. And it must still geolocate me because it's all Ontario. But just for the fun of it, we have a whole bunch of trails. And I'm on board with this idea of a trail, what you see there. Okay? Unfortunately, in Ontario, this is a trail. Okay? So what we have here is something called a recreational trail. And I think the reason I asked the question of why do we use trails is most of us in this day and age are using trails for recreational purposes. It can be for mental health, but typically you're going out for recreational purpose. And the definition of that can be broad. But I would argue in a lot of cases, naturalists are going out for recreational purposes and using the trails. Okay, so you would fall under the class of a recreational trail. Now, the reason we have this title of recreational trail is under the Occupiers Liability Act. It actually provides us with a lower duty of care as opposed to something like a road. Okay. And most people don't know this, but you only have now, you used to have a lot longer time. You only have 6 months now on a recreational trail to actually file a lawsuit. And these are protections in place to try and help us. By the way, if I lie, I'm sorry. Please clarify it with me. But this is just what I've learned over the years. Unfortunately, in Ontario, it seems like we're taking a little bit of liberty, well, not in Ontario, North America, with the term recreational trail. So I like to say a lot of squeaky moneymakers, insurance companies, stuff like that, they like to label everything a recreation trail. So the left picture is the cover photo. That's the waterfront trail in downtown Toronto. The picture in the middle is right outside my house on the way to Lions Head, in between Barrow Bay and Lions Head. That is also the waterfront trail, the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. Not a trail. The picture on the right is my question mark because one block over is that trail from the one from the waterfront trail in downtown Toronto. The trick is it's not a trail. It's actually classified as an active transportation cycling route. So my question is, what the heck is different from the waterfront trail and the trail on the left and the trail on the right? Okay. Now, for the sake of this whole presentation and everything that builds off of it, I'd like to reflect back to when the definition of a recreation trail was tested. And the case is Daly versus London, Ontario. And this came from 2004. And the judgment basically had in it that the trail was not designed to permit the efficient movement from one place to another, but rather, just as the verb to trail connotes, it wanders aimlessly. To my mind, those are the ingredients of a trail. So that's the definition I use for a recreational trail. And I get grumpy when I see recreational trail pop up outside my house when I'm driving. And if you notice, there's 2 people hiking down the road and there's nowhere for them to go. It's not a trail. We need to have a better standard in Ontario. How does this play into you? It's not a fabulous trail. I think we can all agree on that. It could be an awesome active transportation route, but it's not a fabulous trail. Any questions? Clear as mud. Really? We're going to have a boring night, yes. Hey, I know you, Barb. How are you? That's my whole job. And I didn't realize it at the time. So I'm still navigating through this. And for whatever reason, it seems like I've got known for doing 2 things: blending the principles of sustainable trail design with, when possible and feasible for both, the Accessibility Act. And when it pertains to the Accessibility Act, the section that's specific to trails is very, very, very small and very, very general. And I find what we're getting in Ontario is we're getting everybody coming in and consulting on a trail as if it's a building, right? But there's opportunity, and this is where I come in. There's opportunity to figure out, and it goes back to the user type, the type of use, the trail that we're building, and who we're trying to satisfy. And is it possible and feasible for accessibility? And then where I tend to come in is sustainability. So that's the whole premise of this presentation. So thank you for asking the question. But you're right, legally in Ontario, we are supposed to comply with accessibility, with the AODA is what it's called. And this is to any trail being built or upgraded. Yeah, next question. Okay.
And it doesn't go aimlessly when you're on the trail. You usually go in places. I got trails all around where I live, and I'm always going somewhere on the trail that I know I'm going to, whether it's a lookout point, a cliff, a meeting area, or something. There's always somewhere you're going on the trail. I don't think those are trails in the picture. I think that's a route, like for traffic or cars or whatever. It's not a trail. A trail to me sort of implies a certain rustic, lack of pavement, lack of certain surface materials. So that's my 2 cents.
I like your 2 cents, actually. I technically wrote a lot of essays in university, kind of maybe a teacher somewhere along the line, but I'm not good with verbs and nouns. Full disclosure, I'm a trail builder. Uh-oh, now we're really getting the show going. Yes.
The Bruce Trail has to use the road because of like accessibility problems. They're not able to go private land. So there are areas where what we would call a road is in fact part of the Bruce Trail.
Correct. I agree with you. So what I try to advise clients on is those are connections that are, so it's the same as the Great Lakes the Waterfront Trail, the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. The goal of that trail is hopefully, and I'm okay with them calling it a trail. I wish it was called a route first of all, the Great Lakes Waterfront Route. Okay. If the goal of that whole foundation is to establish a trail under my definition or the definition of a recreational trail, eventually, kind of like the Bruce Trail is trying to eventually make the connector along the whole escarpment, then I'm on board with it. And that's the same thing with the Bruce Trail. Is in a perfect world, they're trying to get the trail off the road. Where I try to be careful with things like that, because the Bruce Trail literally was on my road until they bought the Rush Cove section. Where I try to be careful with that is, you have to follow the road to get to the trail, right? And that's the problem where it gets brought up is it's, okay, if we call the Bruce Trail on that section of the road, does that fall under a lower duty of care under the Occupiers Liability Act? I don't think it does. And that's why it's still a road and you're a pedestrian on the road in that case. We're going to be here all night. This is awesome. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Good. Thank you. See, this whole system. Yeah. Shout at me. Yell at me. Remind me. I have to repeat comments. Okay. All right. Now let's get to where we need to go. This is the result right now. Okay. These are what I call trodes and flails. And this is where I find people I'll get brought into a job or I'll be bidding on a job and it's just taken a tangent. And it's taken a tangent for whatever reason. I think people mean the very best. I think the engineers, trail designers, whoever gets involved means the best, but it just gets lost with what I call the standardized approach. And this is to satisfy the definition of a recreational trail. This is to satisfy the concept of a multi-use trail. and this is to satisfy the AODA. Okay? My whole goal, I don't advertise, and I tend to book 1.5 to 2 years in advance. So I love these opportunities to speak with 6 to 10 people in the room. I love these opportunities because my whole premise and theory is to prevent trodes and flails. A trode is applying a road standard to a trail. There's nothing conducive with that trail that they call a trail, that trode. There's nothing conducive to that from a trail's perspective. The trail in the middle is a section of the Trans-Canada Trail, which we had $50,000, and because engineers got involved and spec'd it the way they did, we had to dig down 2 feet through a bunch of awesome trees. They initially wanted us to go through a bunch of pine trees. We convinced them to let us realign the trail, and they still made us do geogrid and geotextile. So as a result, that $50,000 got us 300 meters. This is your money, by the way. Surprise. No? Okay. Moving on. A flail is, why do we mulch in our flower beds? Just out of curiosity. Right. It holds moisture. It helps regulate moisture. Okay. And this is the challenge, is wood chips. And this is where I make the distinction of between public or private. Okay. I got a really good story with my wife. Love her dearly. I was away building trails. I come home and she knows my trail standard. I come home and she's got wood chips in her garden on all of her paths. And I'm like, babe, what are you doing? You can't do this. You know this. We don't use wood chips. Wood chips breaks down into your organics. We try to get the organics off the trail. It holds moisture. We try to get moisture off the trail. This will eventually break down into mud. We are now committed every 2 years to top dressing this wood chip trail or path. It's not conducive. Why didn't we just lay down some stone dust? Or why didn't we find some mineral soil, dig a burrow pit? Do something. Do something. We spent the time to wheelbarrow, or you did, to wheelbarrow the wood chips to the site. Why didn't we get suitable material? And she's like, oh, our neighbor's the arborist. He just dropped off wood chips. It was cheap and it was free and you weren't here. I'm like, you know what? You're right. And that's where I'd make the distinction between private and public. On private trails, do whatever you want. Do what works for you. But on public trails, I think we need a higher standard. So if I see the time and the effort and the resources being spent to put wood chips on a trail, I think we could have done better. And that's why I call those flails. Okay? Well, now that we're off to a good start and everybody wants to lynch me because they see paved trails and they've talked about accessible trails and I've talked about stone dust and I've talked about all this stuff and I've showed you a picture of a mountain bike trail, let's just go back a little bit onto who I am, where I am, and where I am right now and where we're going with this whole thing. This is a long-winded version of basically how I kind of ended up in the trail world. And I'll never forget in grade 9 when they sit you down in a careers class and make you fill out this thing on a computer at the time for what you want to do in life. Trail building was never an option. It just didn't exist. So if you do want to become a trail builder, this is the one avenue. And it's basically you not being satisfied with anything, and then your wife wants to take you hiking and you go. That's why I say influenced by my wife in the most positive way. I'm a water baby. She's a land-based baby. So we have these random pictures. Is it going to work? No. So I have a random picture on my computer screen right here, but you can't see it. Anyways, just trust me when I say it looks like I'm backpacking. You'll notice that the year before we failed. Killarney, La Cloche Silhouette Trail is very hard. We were not prepared. anyways, we went back and we did that. And then we've done a few outers trips or canoeing, hiking trips. And then I ended up going to teachers college and I got involved with BPDS outers. And I started exploring more trails. And then I was guiding for Alive Outdoors, and then I started working for Sun Trail. This is when, although I always loved the outdoors, this was my avenue to actually paddling, biking, and hiking, and starting to partake in trails as what I call a recreational user. And then there was more stuff. And then I got involved in fire rescue. With fire rescue, I ended up basically doing or being given the opportunity to do rope rescue instructor, which is high angle rescue. So anybody falls from Hope Bay North, we'd go in and get them for Parks Canada, provincial parks, all of that. Ice water rescue instructor, search and rescue instructor, a whole bunch of stuff. And I loved it dearly. I still love it to this day. Unfortunately, we have a history in Bruce County of hiring fire chiefs charged with sexual harassment. So I left. Robert did say I'll get political. There it is. Anyways, no, I still loved it. I wish I could do it, but you can't support some people. But that gave me the avenue to accidents happen, and you got to have a plan to deal with them and figure it out. And it gave me a different perspective of trails, because every time we were going to pick somebody up with the rescues, it was generally connected to a trail. I also started grooming ski trails for the Bruce Ski Club. And I did some under the cover of darkness stuff, maybe in Lions Head Nature Reserve. Surprise. If anybody went and skied that and was like, this is groomed. It was myself and another guy. Anybody else want to get into it, please feel free. I can get you a snowmobile. Anyways, and then I became patrol for Bruce Peninsula National Park. And that was the best job in the world, but it was very clear that it was only a 3-month job. But I got to go and do all the backcountry patrols on trails, and it was awesome. I also became a teacher at that time, but teaching in a classroom wasn't really doing it for me. So I applied to the Bruce County Trail Crew, and I got a job. So basically, I was helping to run the Youth at Risk program under the trails manager, and my job was to build and maintain trails. And we either ran youth at risk programs or job creation partnership programs. And that's when, I'll never forget it, in the interview, I was like, it said sustainable trail. And I was, what the heck is this sustainable trails thing? So I look it up, and it turns out it's the International Mountain Bike Association, their guidelines for building trails. And in the interview, they said, can you name one of the principles of sustainable trail design? And I'm like, the half rule. And I got the job because I was the only one that actually said something. I didn't know what the half rule was, but there it is. And here I am. And then we did the Coastal Trail Crew, or Coastal Trail in Pakasaw, the West Coast Trail. And then I decided, my wife and I were trying to figure out this whole avenue of kids. And I said, well, I'll go self-employed. I don't really care for teaching. Maybe I'll try self-employment. And I had the guiding background, and I was like, why don't we start a guiding business? And that's Explorer's Tread. And it's going to be awesome. And what the heck, I'll start a trail building company as a joke. And I literally thought I'd start it as a joke, because who the heck would pay you to build trails? Right? And then Explorer's Tread is good. COVID kind of hurt it, but we still have both. And the truth is, I'm way more busy than I need to be, and I always need to try and pull it back, because I went self-employed to be flexible on my wife's schedule. I also went self-employed so that we could have a family, because my wife's a paramedic in Tobermory. So I work continental shifts, is what I say, on her schedule, which is why I work tomorrow. I have the family Saturday. I work Sunday. I need to be home Monday night by 7 p.m. Yeah. And then I crossed Georgian Bay in 2015. Some say I walk on water. I don't compare myself to that. They don't realize that water is frozen at that time. But 3.33% of it was open water, so we did technically paddle on water. And that's a story for a different day. But that also influenced me in a massive way, because you can have adventures without trails. And by this point, I was already formulating an idea. And then that's where everything ended, because in 2017, we ended up having our son, and I call it a massive ball of wonderful chaos between kids, life, and work, and wife. But you'll see later on, they've formulated my opinions of trails and where I think trails need to be in Ontario and how you can help me do that. I also don't have a clock on this. Okay. So, where are we going with this? There's different types of trails in Ontario. There's 4 different types of trails. Type 1 being fully accessible, fully AODA compliant, the easiest trail you can get. They're also classified as urban trails, okay? These are all, by the way, under recreational trails. So urban trails are either type 1 or type 2. That's dependent on width and amount of grade. Natural environment trails are type 1, 2, and 3. And in that case, we classify those as, they don't have to be accessible, but we should consider accessibility. Okay, that's a natural environment trail, and I'll get to the definitions in a second. And then the third type is a wilderness trail. And a wilderness trail can be either a type 3 or 4 trail. So if anybody knows their trails in Ontario, a type 1 trail is the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail in downtown Toronto, technically. I don't like it. I don't think we should call it a trail, but there it is. A type 2 trail is the Neighborwoods North Trail at the hospital. Okay, that's a type 2 trail because of the width of it. And that's a fantastic organization, by the way. A little narrower, can have a little bit more undulation in the trail. We consider AODA compliance. I'm very adamant, if it's possible and feasible, we do it. And if not, that's okay. Because under the Accessibility Act for trails, if it's not possible or feasible, if it impinges on the natural heritage, cultural heritage of a site, we don't legally have to do it, but we should have it in writing. Okay? And then a wilderness trail. And this is the most misused definition out of anything, because everybody assumes that, oh, we don't have to comply with AODA if we call it a wilderness trail. So unfortunately, they label some natural environment type 1, 2, and 3 trails as wilderness trails when they're not technically wilderness trails. Anybody in the rescue, actually I know one for sure is, anybody in the fire rescue world in here? Anybody? None of you? There's one. I knew that. So Ken, tell me, what's the definition of a wilderness rescue? Wilderness first aid. When do we have to have it? This is a trick question, by the way. You want me to answer? Yep. So you know what's fascinating? So I used to say an hour. You say 30 minutes. When did you take your course? Hey, there's guides in the back room too. A whole bunch of them. Like, don't tell me, you have to know this. Is it? Delayed access to emergency services is the definition that they've changed it to now. Delayed access to emergency services. So think about how many trails in proximity to Owen Sound we're calling wilderness trails that we're calling a wilderness trail, or not calling a wilderness trail, either way you can look at it, where there's a delayed access. That's the definition I use for labeling it as a wilderness trail. Let's go one step further and call it 30 minutes. I used an hour because it's called the golden hour. But think about somebody twisting their ankle and they need access to emergency services and you only have an hour to get them out. So that's the difference between wilderness and natural environment trail for me. Okay? These all then get pinged down into what I like to call managed uses. And out of all the managed uses that we identify, we picked one designed use. Okay? And this is how I think we actually get somewhere in Ontario with trails. So here's your technical terms. Urban trails typically within the built urban environment. Natural environment trails. So we actually, in Owen Sound area, we actually have some urban trails that we're still calling natural environment trails. Generally, natural environment trail, generally class 2 or 3, and wanders through forested or agricultural zones, either within urban areas or in close proximity to population. In most cases, the Bruce Trail is actually a natural environment trail. If you think about the whole trail, it's not a wilderness trail. We'll come back to that. And then a wilderness trail, generally a class 3 or 4 trail, removed from population centers, often with minimal infrastructure and time-delayed access to emergency response. And then there's the legal definition for accessible trails. I put the piece at the bottom because that is specifically the section where we have a bit of leeway. We don't have to comply with the AODA if it's not practical to comply with the requirements or some of them because existing physical or site constraints prohibit modification or addition of element spaces or features such as where surrounding rocks bordering the recreational trail or beach impede achieving the required clear width. Okay, so this goes back to the idea that although we should always try and consider it, we don't have to actually comply with the AODA, which is in complete juxtaposition of Barb's question at the start. Okay? But we should. Now, what the heck? Yep. That's an excellent question. So, pardon? Oh, yeah, right. Thank you. Well done. We're going to get along. So the question was, does the width, what is the, sorry if I'm going to try and paraphrase it here. What is the width of the class of trails and is that for emergency vehicles? Okay. Fascinating thing, I don't have an answer for you, but I've tried to develop a document for York Regional Forests. And I tried to specifically put in there emergency access. And it was type 1 trail, a 5-ton truck can go down it. Type 2 trail, and this is specific to York region, type 2 trail is an ATV or side-by-side. Type 3 trail is a mountain stretcher or a single track trail, which I have some toys to help facilitate that. But what drives me, I'll never forget my Ecology 101 class in university. And my professor was sitting, he put up a picture of a cul-de-sac in a city. And there was these like moderate houses, nothing too special, but it was a cul-de-sac. And the cul-de-sac was huge. And he's like, why do we have this? And everybody's rhyming off some stuff. And it comes back to fire trucks. And then he puts up a picture of a North American fire truck. And then he puts up a picture of a Japanese fire truck. And he's like, they're pretty efficient at what they do. I don't think we need these gigantic things. Right? So that's my question. I can't tell you how many trail courses I've taught. Niagara Falls, for example, the Whirlpool Trail, we're standing in the bottom and they try to dictate why the trail should be 3 meters wide so that they have an emergency access. Right. Now, they've done some fascinating stuff there where they have a helicopter on standby, but whatever, that's conversation for the bar after. But they have some fascinating, there's some fascinating things that they've done to try and facilitate this. But that's the thing is, I'll get brought in as a consultant to help design a trail. And they come back and say, I want a 5-ton truck to drive down it. And I say, no, this is a natural environment trail. It falls under a type 2 or 3. This is going to be your emergency services. This is how you facilitate that operation. Now, in a perfect world, and this is a perfect world, if we have a closed property where we start developing a trail from scratch, I like to try and satisfy every user. I'm not talking non-motorized or motorized. I mean, I'd like to satisfy every type or every physical user on that trail by offering about 500 meters of a type 1 or type 2 accessible trail. And then you build off of that. You can have a larger network of type 2 that's not accessible. And then off of that, you have a type 3 trail, which is a progression level of difficulty. That's in a perfect world. And that's so that every user has the potential to go to that property and not feel like they were discriminated against. That's a touchy term. Okay. So to kind of answer your question, this is a trails classification. It goes from type 1 trail to type 4 trail. Type 4 is an unrecognized trail. It's not a trail. The trail doesn't exist. That's gross moron, what we backpacked. And that's why I love that trail, because I didn't have to look at it as a trail. We were following animal tracks, and then the animal tracks all of a sudden die in something called Tuckamore, and then you're stuck. And if you replace the T with an F, that's what you are. And you have to backtrack. And I didn't swear. Okay? It was the most amazing experience in the world, though, because I was orienteering. And we were following these tracks that weren't trails. And for me, I didn't have to think about it as a trail. Okay? As opposed to a type 3 trail, I think it's called the Grand Traverse, the Long Traverse. It's the hardest one, whatever, in gross moron. Versus a type 3 trail, to use the Parks Canada model, the West Coast Trail is technically a type 3 trail. Okay? Now, this experience I had a problem with, because I don't do well in rain or mud. And when you Google it, all you see is you will be up to your waist in mud and it will rain. And I'm like, kind of a baby with this one. Okay? So that's the experience I was sold. I knew what the experience was because it's classified as a type 3 experience. I was expecting a miserable adventure with my wife. We had the best weather in the world. There was no mud, and it was the best experience I had as well, because I was sold something and I went in being undersold and it over-delivered. And that's the model we got to think about with trails in Ontario. Undersell, over-deliver. So that's why I can't write proposals and bids, because I always want to undersell the experience. There's other contractors that want to oversell the experience, and there's no leeway on the back end if they underdeliver. Type 2, the difference essentially between type 2 and type 1, if we talk about accessibility, is the width and the amount of the grade. So in the trail world, we use grades. We use percent grades. Okay, so to make a fully accessible trail for everybody, we want to keep the grade 5% or less, overall average grade. However, using as best practices is what we have to do, because there's no legal precedent for it. Using best practices, I like to use the York Regional Accessible Trail Standards, and we can go up to 10% on an accessible trail. It is possible if there's physical constraints. So that's the difference between type 1 and type 2 if we're including accessibility. It's width and the amount of grade, and then we get into the tread surface. That, what was it, $50,000, 300-meter engineered job in Northern Ontario. We probably had a 2-hour meeting with the engineers trying to get them on board. I was saying some stuff, tread, blah, 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 tread. This is the tread. The tread is your walking surface. The engineer comes back and goes, sorry, what's a tread? After 2 hours. And I'm like, it's the name of my business. Like treadscape. Get it? See the idea now? So generally, and this is where I tend to come in and do difficult spots. The type of trail I build can be very intrusive. I have to manipulate the surface to get it to do what I want it to do. But I'm also trying to follow the principles of sustainable trail design. Okay? And that's the challenge. Oh no. Remember how I said it wasn't charging? You know the funny part too? Come on. Hey. Nope, working. We're working. We got it. We don't got it. I think it's my thinger dinger with the thingy on the thing that's connected to the thing. I build trails. No, not thingy dingy. This should come.
Click on the little battery down there.
Well,
Oh, you think it's
yeah, this should light up. This is hilarious. You have an equipment malfunction in the middle of a presentation. Plug your ears, I'm gonna blow.
battery warning is off.
There.
Okay.
Hooray. I'm guessing my computer's been in a dusty environment. Okay. Where were we? Trail classification. This, if nothing else comes from this. Oh, no, don't go from the beginning. Anyways, if nothing else comes from this, remember, we don't want to build trodes and flails. And if you are going to walk out and volunteer your time on a trail, know what the heck you're volunteering your time on. And consult the trail classification. Try and figure it out. Okay? It's very important. Now, a trail classification is not a difficulty rating. Okay? Think of the mountain bike trails and the pedestrian trail that we talked about. Both of them are type 3 trails because of the width and what they do. But you can have a different level of difficulty within a type 3 trail. So in a perfect world, if I get brought in as a consultant, and unfortunately most of the time, like Robert alluded to, everybody applies for funding and then they get the funding and then they start asking around trying to figure out who can actually do the work. And my name gets brought up and then I get brought in and then I have to have a long drawn out conversation on explaining why we're going to change what they applied for funding for, because I don't really like it. So if you can include me in the beginning, in the funding stage, that would be, or in the concept phase, it would save us a lot of headaches and it would be awesome, please. And I promise we won't pave the trail because I don't do that. Okay, so in the consulting phase, good trail design is a mix of 3 things. Anytime we entertain a trail, I don't care if you're a volunteer going out to work on it for an hour, I don't care what you do, I don't care if you're being paid $100,000. There's 3 things. It's positive, safe, and sustainable. We always try and make the trail as positive for the user, as safe for the user, and as sustainable as possible so that we don't have to spend a whole lot of social, economic, and ecological resources to fix it. Okay? The positive and the safe go back to a trail classification and identifying our user. The sustainability thing is generally where I like to come in. Okay? So, to do this properly, we first start off with identifying a trail type. We've covered that. Then I get into identifying managed uses. These are a list of different managed uses, potential managed uses for different organizations. So U.S. Forest Service, which I like, is pedestrian, pack and saddle, bicycle, motorcycle, all-terrain, four-wheel drive, cross-country ski, snowshoe, and snowmobile. Trans-Canada Trail, which their trail classification is heavily influenced by Parks Canada Trail classification, which is the one I showed you and the one I really like. They suggest pedestrian. So whoever said pedestrian earlier, that's why you're bang on. They suggest pedestrian, which is walking, hiking, running, horseback riding, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, on-road cycling, leisure cycling, mountain biking, OHV, which is off-highway vehicle, the ones you don't like and I don't like, and snowmobile, groomed. Those are the different managed uses. Now, we're kind of getting past this, but we're still stuck in it. For a long time, we were selling the concept of multi-use trails. And it was this kumbaya thing where everybody with those managed uses could come out and use the trail. And they could go down the trail hand in hand and not have any conflict at all. It was excellent for funding. It was, if you put multi-use trail, you could get access to a whole lot of funding. In the real world, I can't stand multi-use trails because they don't work. I'm a fan of designed use trail. And what that essentially means is we look at all the managed uses, and out of all those managed uses, we try and piss off a whole lot of people by identifying one of those uses, the designed use. But I find what we can actually do if we do that is we can provide a better experience if we do it properly. We can still try and have the other users there, but we're a lot better off if we try and not bite off a designed use. Now, here's how it works in the real world. Kind of maybe, sure. But here's ideally how it works. We have designed use trail segments within a multi-use property. Oh, that sounds better. So what we actually do is if we have a large trail network and we have enough area and we have enough existing trail, we try and figure out what each type of user likes and wants out of that. And based on that, that helps us identify all the managed uses. And then based on specific trail segments, we then identify the designed use per trail segment. Okay. The one that doesn't work well is naturalists because they don't use a trail. Take a guess what the majority of my clients are. Nature Conservancy of Canada, Ontario Nature, Scarlet Biosphere Conservancy, Conservation Authorities, Trans-Canada Trail, Environment Canada, Canadian Wildlife Services. Like, it's fun. It's a fun brain exercise. And I should, full disclosure, I love going out with all of you. And the reason is you help me bring the trail to life in a way that I don't know, because I don't know what the bird is. I don't know what the fern is. I don't know what the specific thing in the tree is. I don't know what that moss is. And there's something called a Hills thistle in Tobermory. I never knew what it is, but I'll tell you, when I built a boardwalk around it, I had every single one of them identified to me, and I had to go around them. And it was fascinating, and it is fascinating. And that's why I tend to come in and try and have an open mind. And I just did a trail for Nature Conservancy of Canada in Madoc. We had this whole thing planned. We had to build 2 bridges. I had some equipment on site to build the bridge. We were just doing the final sign off, and my client looked down and goes, "Woo, that's ginseng." I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty." It was in the complete middle of the trail that they'd already brushed out, right where we were about to build a bridge. So guess what I got to do? I got to spend a day redesigning a whole new trail. We added 2 more bridges to the project, and we did it for the same amount of money because I'm an idiot. I am not a businessman. I care more. Yes, I do get paid to do this. I care more about the product of a trail. And unfortunately, I can say that, but I've got so busy in time. I do have to get paid to do what I do. I'd love to help. Sometimes if you're close enough to me, I can help. Or if you wander onto my trail tomorrow, if I'm working there, I'll help. And if I have the time, I'll help. But if I don't have the time, I gotta figure out other things. Bruce Trail. What are the managed uses for the Bruce Trail? It says there at the bottom. It depends what sign you see at the entrance. Okay? They have some old signage that says hiking, skiing, and snowshoeing. They're a multi-use trail. If they're a natural environment trail, they have to consider AODA compliance. Now this is where I come in. I'm the first, and I'm adamant, and I've changed my tone on this. The Bruce Trail is a type 3 wilderness, natural environment, or wilderness experience, and it should stay as such. However, there's areas that the Bruce Trail passes through which they should work with partners to create type 1 and 2 experiences to contribute to that as a cohesive network. And that's where I come back to it. I also I'm not going to give Bruce Trail too many pats on the back, because I'm also critical of the Bruce Trail for building too much infrastructure. If it's a type 3 wilderness experience, roots, rocks, and mud in the context of the activity is okay. And in some cases, it's your safety mechanism. A case that I like to point out where this hasn't worked is the Georgian Bay Trail in Bruce Peninsula National Park. And I firmly believe we are causing people's injuries by making a 3-meter wide trail that goes almost out to the cliff, but they don't get them to the cliff. The user wants to see the cliff, and then you throw them downstairs, and then you expect them to hike a type 3 difficult trail to get to the grotto. We haven't followed through on the user experience. And this is where I come back to, let's figure out how to make it as positive, safe, and sustainable. And that comes back to the designed use. Okay? Yep. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, that is, did you see no dog walking on there? Okay, so I do put it on. It's slightly controversial sometimes. Anybody familiar with Ontario Nature? Okay. There's an area called Cawthra-Mulloch Nature Reserve, or Cawthra-Mulloch Nature Reserve. Okay, it's over by Newmarket. That's probably one of the highest frequency properties I go to. So I built an accessible trail there, and I've also redeveloped a type 3 trail network. And we tried to increase the accessibility on that network. I also built 2 different bridges for them. I've done a lot of development work there for them. I had a lot of trail users coming in and tell me what they felt about the trail. And I'm fine with this. One of the biggest things was, I used to come here even just 5 years ago, and it's going to be overrun by Newmarket. Okay. I used to come here 5 years ago and I could see birds, I could see deer, I could see everything. Now there's so many damn dog walkers, I don't see anything. So I told my client, Smara, I was like, hey, York Region has off-leash dog park. 2, York Region allows on-leash dogs. Just down the road from Cawthra-Mulloch, there's a dog park. What if we try and provide an area for naturalists? What if we try and get this trail back to what we want it to be? So they made the decisions to say no dogs. So there's no dogs allowed at that property. And I 100% support it. I can't enforce it because I have equipment sitting there and I don't need sugar put in my machines. But what it does is it gives some of you in the audience who I know want that place to be your own, the opportunity to tell the dog walkers that this is actually a dog-free area. And I'll leave it up to you. If it's an enforcement issue, there's nothing we can do. Maybe this shouldn't go on YouTube. But we're trying. We're trying to figure out and go back to the idea of positive, safe, and sustainable for those users at Kothra, right? We're trying to give them a cohesive experience. If we hear something, or if I hear something and I think it fits within, then maybe we can suggest it. And I'm not just saying I'm saying we, because you help in this. Yeah. I don't know if anybody's figured out there's more to trails than just clearing a corridor. So I'm happy to have a conversation in the future, and we can't cover everything. Right now, my thing says, or at one point it said 1 hour and 47 minutes, and I was like, whoa, I'm way over. And then I realized it was the whole show. So I don't know where my timing's at, but here we go. This is the big R word. York Region won't let me talk about it because they have a specific department. And I'm like, how can you not talk about risk management without addressing positive, safe, and sustainable? But anyways, here's my risk management 101 for you pertaining to trails. I like to say keep users reasonably safe in the context of the activity. I had a type 3 trail down in Wilmot Township, and I was really excited because I had an insurance adjuster from Frank Cowan Company, which if anybody knows the Mountain Bike Adventure Park, that was the insurance company underwriting that show. I finally had a chance to talk to this guy and bounce some stuff off to him in this course. We were hiking a type 3 trail. I said, is there anything you'd like to add? He turned around and said, I'd like all the roots and rocks painted orange. I said, pardon me? And he goes, they're a hazard. I said, in the context of the activity, that's your safety mechanism. And I firmly believe this. Roots and rocks, you're in tune with your feet. You're looking down. You're trying to figure out where your foot placement is. When we make accessible trails, and I got to be careful with how I'm wording this, because a lot of my work is accessible trails. When we make an easier trail, which can or cannot be accessible, may not be accessible, we are effectively laying down stone dust and making it flat. How many people here have been walking down a sidewalk and they've been walking and all of a sudden they've fallen over because they stubbed their toe on a little piece that heaved? Okay, I call this the sidewalk standard, and it is 50 millimeters. If your sidewalk is heaved by 50 millimeters, they have to fix it. They have to shave it down. They have to figure something out. So unfortunately, the standardized approach, if something has heaved 50 millimeters on a trail, they see that as a hazard. But in the context of the activity, I think it's our safety mechanism. On a type 1 trail, we don't want tripping hazards 50 millimeters. On a type 2 trail, we got to figure out if it is. If there's only one over like 500 meters, we should mitigate it. But if they're every 5 meters, that's a part of our safety mechanism. And I'm adamant about this. So let's think back to that grotto, the Georgian Bay Trail. We've sent people down it. They can get down there with their stilettos, their high heels, their flip-flops, their bare feet. And then we get them right to a set of stairs. And then from the stairs, we get them to the cliff. That cliff is a polished surface now. They're subconsciously not involved with the trail experience when we've sent them down that Georgian Bay Trail. They're not there. So when you, as a rescuer, go down and pick somebody up that's fallen off the cliff, naturally, the first thing I said was, what happened? I don't know. I walked down the trail, and next thing you know, I was down here. And I think that's on us as builders. I think we got to understand that roots, rocks, mud in the context of the activity is our safety mechanism. And this is vice versa for the Bruce Trail. I don't think we should be building type 1 and type 2 boardwalks if we're calling it a wilderness trail. There's this notion in Europe where if you go trekking on a trail, you ford through water, right? So let's put down some stones, right? It could be wet. It could be underwater. John, where are you? You sent me an email, and I apologize because I built a boardwalk at the place with the Hills Thistle. That dang boardwalk flooded so bad that when you walked across the boardwalk, you were still getting your feet wet. Correct. Which we'll get to in a second. So we raised it up, right? We did raise it up. But there's an expectation in Europe that you will get your feet wet. I still do not get my feet wet when I step out of a canoe. I have it ingrained in me. And there's some people, there's some guides that just laugh at me because I will do everything under the sun to keep my feet dry. And I'm the one saying this. So if I'm saying it, it's pretty bad. Like we got to get back to the concept of roots, rocks, and mud in the context of the activity. And it comes back to, and this is why I don't think the Bruce Trail needs to facilitate an accessible experience for them specifically, because within their capability, within their means, I don't think they have the resources to facilitate and manage an accessible experience. So in that sense, that goes back to identifying an acceptable duty of care and maintenance schedule. York Region only manages and maintains their trails once every 2 years, and it's for tree assessments. I'm like, that doesn't comply. You should be doing it monthly, quarterly at best. Oh no. I'm like, okay, so let's just call these all type 3 trails and lower our duty of care. No, we're accessible trails. I'm like, okay, well then we kind of got to get the resources behind this accessible experience you're trying to facilitate. Now, what happens if you can't? Like, what if you look at it and you're like, we cannot do this? And Ontario Nature is an excellent example of this, and I fully support it. If they don't have the means to attain a higher duty of care, so the higher the class you get into, type 1s and 2s, the higher duty of care, okay? If you realize that maybe we shouldn't be biting off that level of service, then we can figure out land use agreements. Okay, Bruce Ski Club's an excellent example of that. They have land use agreements with the Conservation Authority, and that's a way of the Conservation Authority also protecting themselves and putting a layer of a buffer in between them and the activity of skiing. Excellent example. Been doing it a heck of a long time too, so good on you. Professional design of trails, that's just a shameless plug for me. I like to be paid. Lower an acceptable level of risk, okay? I don't build jumps when I build mountain bike trails because I do this for the public. It's not an acceptable level of risk for me. So I'll work with the clubs and we'll build the trail and then they can build the jumps, but at least that's not on me. And then the hard part is going to be proving it in court, which I don't want to deal with. And then prove due diligence. And this is where we can get better collectively. Written inspections and assessments, professional risk audits, and risk management plans. Okay, that's how we protect ourselves. So all of you as volunteers, this is how you're actually protecting yourself if you want to go out and play on trails as a volunteer. We can put these in place. If your organization doesn't have them in place, they should get them in place because it protects your bum in court. I almost said something. It protects your bum in court. Okay? This is why it's important to me. And I still have a problem with this. When I was working for Bruce County, before I worked for Bruce County, I stabbed myself at one of their forest properties. They had a logging operation and it was a slash pile and I fell and I stabbed myself in the side. So I was when I got hired there, I was very, very particular about how everybody was cutting back their trees. when we were building a trail. In 2020, I was doing a favor for an organization up by my house, and we decided, it was actually the day that it was right around when we shut down because of COVID. A 3-year-old boy who happens to be my son was walking with me, or with us, and he slipped and fell on a stick. This is the stick. It's right on the trail tread, and it was cut because of maintenance. A volunteer had cut it. The stick was about this high, and it hit him right in the throat. And I was standing right beside him, and I couldn't catch him. I had somebody tell me years ago, let your kid fall, when he was a baby. They're like, don't catch him every time. Let him fall. Let him learn how to fall. And I think that person that told me that saved his life that day. And the reason is, when that little boy fell, he put his arms out and he caught himself. And that stick stabbed him in the throat. And if you look, you can see wood shards in his throat. That's how close that stick was to going through his throat. That stick just happened to be cut the length of his arm. And I think that's the only thing that saved my son that day. And the hardest thing you can do as a parent is take a picture, because you know that you've tried to prevent this. The harder thing is calling the organization, the CAO actually, because you're about to submit a grant to update the risk management practices and file a complaint and say you want it dealt with the top down, from the top down, and don't use my name. March 15th, 2020. A year later, 2021, hazard still present. A year later, I met somebody and I said, hey, did a report ever come through for a kid that was stabbed in the throat? Yeah, we went up and we didn't see anything. And he said, how did you know? And I said, that was my son. You're damn, they're there. 2022, hazard still present. That's now my 2-year-old daughter that I have there, and they're still there. 2023, 2024, there's actually over 200 of these in a 450-meter section. And we can do better. We can do better. Remember, positive, safe, sustainable, and that's to a targeted use. And I don't care who you are, anybody that leaves that sort of stuff, roots, rocks, in the context of the activity, is our safety mechanism. A cut stick is never. You always go flush cut back. Please. Now, here's where it comes back to. You're short on time. You have this decision, or your back's hurting. You have the decision to cut it halfway down and leave a hazard, or you have the decision to leave it. What do? You leave it. They're fluffy and bendy on the end. It's not a hazard. Being slapped in the face, you're going to be okay. And if it's too big of a deal, get a work party. But never cut it at that height, please. All right, remember, positive, safe, sustainable. That goes back to the trail classification. That goes back to the managed uses, the designed use, and the specifications that we're building and maintaining that trail to. Sustainable, we haven't covered that. Uh-oh. This comes back to the idea of trails as trail building as an art and a science. I'll never look down upon anybody going out and designing their own trail, because all of us have a different piece of art. Okay, what I get firm on is, if you are going to design a trail, at least try to follow the principles of sustainable trail design. Okay, so the art, each of us sees a trail differently, especially that's influenced with what we like to do, use it for as recreational users. The science is the principles of sustainable trail design. The form is the trail type, the managed use, the design use. Why are we building the trail the way we are? And the function is design considerations. We don't need to design a trail in this room. We won't use it. So what is a sustainable trail? When possible and feasible, I don't deflect from this. Anytime I'm touching a trail, and this is why I only do about 5 kilometers in total a year, is because I'm trying to fix the difficult spots, the problem spots. So I'm always trying to use the principles of sustainable trail design. Generally, this is the concept of sustainability. So we have to take into account the environment, the economic factors, and the social factors that all contribute to the trail. And if we do it properly, we can get to this concept of a sustainable trail. For me personally, from a trail building perspective, this is what I tend to focus on. It means working with the watershed. I'm not trying to force my way through, okay? It's using the existing landscape. I like to say that I look at the microtopography. I let the land try and explain where the trail wants to go when we're trying to come back point A to point B aimlessly, right? Aimlessly? We try to avoid low-lying areas. This is my most common job. I get brought in because we just went through a low-lying area and then we have to fix it. And we try and respect the natural processes. This is where you, as an audience, generally come in, because this isn't the areas I know well. So in the case of the Hills thistle, the ginseng, all of that, I need to know if there's stuff. If we're consulting and doing the design properly, I normally look at you as volunteers. If you pop up and you're willing to put in your time, I look at you and I say, where's your secret spot? They go, I'm not telling you. And I'm like, you kind of want to tell me. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because that will become a negative control point for the user. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if we're going to bring the public into this property, if you have a secret spot, maybe this is the opportunity to keep it your secret spot. Thank you for being a volunteer. Unless it's just amazing, and then I do want the trail to go there. But generally speaking, I will try and keep your secret spots secret. The ginseng is an example of something that's so amazing and so neat to look at. But in the case of trail design, that became a negative control point for us. We took the trail away from that. Okay? The Hills thistle, I've never designed a trail that does so many turns, because normally the trail user won't follow it. But it's a guided experience only. That trail is not advertised. There's no signage. You wouldn't know there's a trail there and all the infrastructure until you get back into it. And it's because of the Hills thistle. And I was sold it as a guided or knowing experience. Yep. Uh-oh. Here we go. Anyways, there's different techniques of building trails. These are the 5 golden nuggets for sustainable trail building. This is what I like to do. In a perfect world, this is what I need to build a trail. I have my saw, I have my tools, and I have my grubbing tools right here. I can't afford to build a trail by hand anymore. I'd love to. What I'm known for is finishing a trail by hand. This is the reality, and this is what I struggle with, because you tend to be my client. I need to be able to move equipment. I need to have a float trailer. I have a place to stay. Because I tend to work by myself, I commute on a motorcycle. My wife and kids sometimes come with us. That's a trip to Quetico to do trail building courses for 60 Indigenous youth. And I have an enclosed trailer for all my toys. This is also the reality of trail building. These are all nature reserves. Sorry, not this one. This is the mountain bike trail. So that's what that looked like before. And I was very clear. It's an intrusive process. Okay? I struggle with this. And the reason I struggle with this is Bruce Alvar. I have ATVs. That's how I get my stuff in and out. This is how I make it still cost effective. And my clients all understand this. And this is why all my clients are still reoccurring clients. Because I try to work with everybody. We try to identify the spots where I can and cannot go. Volunteers can't keep up here, so I have a piece of equipment that helps do it. I can do it in an hour, right? Positive, safe, and sustainable. But this is where we are in the world in Ontario right now, is we're trying to figure this out. And I'm the one who feels like I'm sitting here trying to give you a type 3 experience. This is the way I make it happen. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm forever grateful to this property owner who bought the equipment for me with the expectation that I build them a trail. Because I didn't know where I'd end up at the time. And here I am. But this is the reality of trail building. If you want me to build a trail by hand, I can. It's just going to take a lot more time and it's going to cost a lot more. The other option is we work together with volunteers. You're open to the idea of what sustainable trail building is, how to make it positive and safe and sustainable to a designed use. And we work together to make it happen. I call this my Lamborghini fund because water always wins and we should try to avoid all this stuff. This is a trail. We rerouted the trail up here. We did the bench cut technique. I call these my retirement funds. I also called them wood poop houses. We always should try and attain a brick poop house. Okay? Let's go for brick. Right? Built like a brick house. Everybody get it? Okay. This is a type 3 boardwalk. You don't have to build a boardwalk like this. This is $90 a meter. That one's $400 a meter. Sorry, this one's about $400 a meter. Today's prices. If it's an accessible boardwalk, this gets very slippery. You said that. We have to try and figure this out. Asphalt shingles is not an option, in my opinion. These are sensitive environments. So then I deflect back to why. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And we have to have an honest conversation about if we should be building this stuff. And if we come back to, well, honestly, it'd be great to get people here, then we can build it. But let's use a higher standard. And here's the brick poop houses. Use in situ stone if we can. Instead of building out of wood, let's do this. Let's find the rock ridges. And I think this is what the Bruce Trail can do better. Instead of finding the open area and going through that, maybe we have to cut a couple trees. And I don't mean big trees. I mean like a couple trees. And we route the trail through the higher elevation microtopography. And by doing that, we make it more sustainable. These are my deferred retirement funds because I never have to come back to them. Boardwalks are my retirement fund because I have to rebuild them every 15 to 20 years. This is a success. Neighborwoods North at the hospital. There's a trail that goes down to the stoplights. I can't stand it. It's a fall line trail. We got to fix it. So I kind of maybe was trying to get a hold of whoever was responsible for it. I met them at the hospital with somebody named Chris LaForest, and we figured out this design together. And that's the trail that's there. Somebody took my design and actually built it. And in that case, they did a pretty darn good job. And I'm proud of that. My dream is to one day build an accessible trail for motorized scooters because those little puppies go up to 16%. This is Williams Cave. We did some signage and reroutes. to try and get the user to go where we want, and it was a success. I had a lady stop and go, "Oh, wow, the whole Bruce Trail? You're going to put a fence along the whole Bruce Trail?" And I was like, "Pardon me?" She goes, "That's a great summer job." And I'm like, no. And I don't know that the rope fence was needed, but we did it. Goldie Feldman Accessible Trail. Again, I got brought in. There was a $50,000 engineer job. One of my NCC clients saw me at Cawthron Mullock and said, "Can you come have a look?" And I had a look at the pin flags and I was like, "This isn't accessible and it's not sustainable." I said, "How far are you in?" She said, "We're done." I said, "How much have you spent?" She said, $50,000. I was like, "Pardon me?" So then I got brought in, and for $2,000, I redesigned their trail. It goes back to the standardized approach. There's a different way we can do things. This is the trail. I didn't build it because I was too busy. There was a section that they didn't change, and unfortunately, this is where I say, why are we building accessible trails if we don't follow through on the level of service we're going to provide? This is that same trail a year later. If we're going to build it accessible, which we should when possible and feasible, we have to follow through. And unfortunately, we don't have any grants in Ontario that provide maintenance. We can get all the grants in the world to build an accessible trail right now. I've done 4 this year, but at no point have my clients got a grant to maintain them. And that's the thing that I need to know, is that these trails are going to be maintained. And that's why I look to you as the volunteers, and I thank you for maintaining these things. This is a nice little case thought study. I have so many opinions about this. It's not funny. This is Lions Head Nature Reserve, and full disclosure, Great Canadian Trails, this is the trip that my wife and I run for them. So I'm technically helping overpopulate this. And I say that because this is Lions Head Nature Reserve on the way in. And I think an honest conversation needs to be had between the provincial parks, the First Nations, the municipality, and the Bruce Trail to try and figure it out. Because I don't look at this as these people need to go home. I look at this as a management issue. Let's figure out why they're here. Let's figure out how to satisfy what they're looking for. And in most cases, what they're looking for is a picture on the cliff. So instead of making them hike 2 hours to get the picture on the cliff, what if we try and facilitate a type 2 experience? And we use the inland side, we use the emergency access route, and I have a route on my GPS, and we get them to the cliff quicker and we get them back. And we take the pressure off the Bruce Trail to try and manage this, because it's a type 3 hiking trail. They shouldn't be responsible for trying to manage this. So let's get everybody to the table and let's try and figure out more solutions. And there we go. It's just a fabulous trail. Yeah. And as I was driving here, I was like, oh, I forgot to put in thank you to the volunteers. So you can see that as I was standing here, I put thanks you to the volunteers. So sorry about that. Anyways, question. If anybody wants to leave, feel free to go. I don't know what time it is.
Lights up. Bring it back. I think we have time for I'm going to put 3 questions. Graham.
Yeah.
You worked with Hap Wilson in Toboggan.
I have not worked with Hap Wilson, but
Hap
I know
Wilson.
I know Hap
To
Wilson.
the Zoom people.
Sorry, I have not worked with Hap Wilson, but I do know Hap Wilson. Yeah, eco trails. Yeah, I like them. Got nothing. It's the designer, the whole designer thing. We each have our different perspectives. He does fascinating structures too. Yeah.
So we were just talking about they did that at Spears Bluff. They just up the road here, past Stone Sound, up that way. They have a little area where you
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another access point from another where you can hike in 9K on the trail. So they did kind of what you're talking about, getting people there for their pictures. And
Is it working?
yeah,
Yeah. Like it's not my type of experience, but yeah. Woo!
We're gonna call off questions. We still have one more item on our agenda for
What?
people who are starting to leave. So, Bob, I want you to.
Sorry, Bob.
How are you?
Good. So I have the pleasure of thanking Zane for his presentation. Now he really did. You have a lot of detail, and it was quite interesting because one of the things I like doing is walking off trail, and so I'm one of these people that you know about. But I've also been involved in building trails, and I think a lot of the things he was saying about building trails really make a lot of sense. And I think, sometimes I come to these things and I don't learn very much at all, but I think I learned quite a bit tonight. So in behalf of everybody here and myself, I'd like to thank you for coming and doing that presentation and being so thorough. And